Hello everyone and welcome to the Active Lives Adult Survey presentation on the most recent release of the Active Lives Survey. The headline stats, we've got 1,888,610, moving towards the target of 2 million moving by 2021, with the 29th most active region out of 45 areas, and we are at 72.9% of active and fairly active people towards the target of 75% by 2025. The key activity level stats across Greater Manchester. In active, we're at 27.1%, which is 603,000 people, do fewer than 30 minutes a week compared to the national of 25.2%. Within our fairly active, which is 30 to 149 minutes a week, we're at 12.3%, which is about 274,400 people. So they're fairly active, but they don't reach their 150 minutes per week compared to the national of 12.5%. Active levels, 60.6%, which is roughly 1.34 million who do 150 minutes or more a week compared to the national of 62.3%. It's just worth noting that there is no significant change since November 16-17. So this just shows the activity levels over 12 months in Greater Manchester. So as you can see, active has declined, but unfairly active has increased. There's also been a decrease in inactive people. So combined active and fairly active were 29th from 28th in 16-17, and we're increase in active is the 6th largest, and decrease in inactive is the 8th largest across the county sports partnership areas. So what does this mean for the localities? Across the localities there are 4 areas that are higher than the national. So they're Bury, Manchester, Salford and Stockport. There's been kind of 3 significant stats to share with you. So the significant increase of active people in Salford. There's also been a significant decrease of inactive people in Salford, and there's been a significant increase of active people in Manchester. Most of the boroughs kind of sit with the trend, that there's been an increase in fairly active, a decrease in inactive, but also a decrease in active people. The headline results show that inactivity and activity has decreased, but fairly active has increased. In general, the boroughs do follow this trend, except where there has been an increase in activity, fairly active has decreased. Oldham and Rochdale, there's been an increase in inactivity, but also an increase in the fairly active people. And in Stockport, there's been an increase in inactivity, but a decrease in fairly active and active. It's the only borough that's kind of different from the trend. So when we break this down into demographic information, this shows the levels of activity split by gender for Greater Manchester over the last year and the last 6 months. Greater Manchester is slightly behind national for active levels. 64.5% of males are active and 60.3% of females are active nationally. Whereas we sit at 63% of males and 58.3% of females. The gap remains for inactive people compared to national levels. So there's 23.8% of males and 26.4% of females nationally that are inactive. Greater Manchester is 25.6% of males and 28.4% of females, which gives us a 2.8% gap compared to the 2.6 national gap. But the trend is remaining stable for active and inactive when it comes to gender. So to break gender down for the boroughs, Bury and Oldham have actually got a larger percentage of active females than males. Biggest decrease in inactive has been witnessed in Manchester for males and Salford for females. 9 boroughs have seen increase in active males and 6 boroughs have seen an increase in active females. The biggest increase in active is in Manchester for males and Bury for females, and Tameside has the highest gap between active males and females. When we look at age, the biggest increase has been witnessed nationally among the 55 to 74 year olds. Activity levels kind of generally decrease with age, and the sharpest decrease is still within that 75 plus years of age. So nationally in the last 12 months there has been a significant decrease in the number of inactive 55 to 74 year olds and a significant increase in the number of active 55 to 74 year olds. Greater Manchester has not seen a significant change, but there has been one nationally. So we break this down by borough. Within the 16 to 34 year old category, there's been a decrease in the number of inactive people in Manchester. There's been an increase in the number of inactive people in Oldham, and inactivity as a trend has actually increased across Greater Manchester within this age group, which is different than when you compare it to the 35 to 54-year-olds. Most boroughs have seen a decrease in inactivity levels among this age group, and all boroughs apart from Rochdale, Trafford and Wigan have seen an increase in activity levels in this age group. So then we go to the 55 to 74-year-old category, and there has been an increase in activity levels in all boroughs apart from Stockport and Rochdale across Greater Manchester in this group. And the 75 plus, there's been a huge increase in the number of active people in Bury, from 29.1% to 40.9%, and the other boroughs have either seen a decrease in active people or there isn't really enough data to show what's happened here. So when we look at the socio-economic groups and their level of activity, the trend's kind of similar to previous years in that the NSSEC 6 to 8 is still the lowest for active levels and the highest for inactive levels, but their fairly active has increased over the last year. So when we break this down by borough, Rochdale has the highest inactivity at 6 to 8, with 42.3% of people being inactive, but their 3 to 5 group is more active than their 1 to 2. In Tameside, the 3 to 5 are less inactive than the 1 to 2. In Salford, the 3 to 5 are more inactive than the 6 to 8, and they roughly have the same activity levels. And when we look kind of at a picture over time, Stockport is quite close with their inactivity, only ranging from 19.2% to 23.4% across the different bands. And Wigan, Oldham, Manchester, Bury and Salford have all seen an inactivity decrease within the 6 to 8 group. And Manchester and Salford have also seen an increase in the activity levels within that group. When we look at levels of activity for disability, we can still see that people who have a long-term disability are more inactive and less active than people without, but the fairly active has seen a significant increase nationally in the number of people with a long-term disability taking part in sport and physical activity. So when we look at this across the boroughs, Salford and Oldham have the highest percentage of active people with a long-term disability. Trafford, Salford and Wigan have the largest gap in inactivity between those with a long-term disability and those without. And over time, Salford and Bury have seen the largest increase in active people with long-term disability over the last 12 months. So they've both roughly seen a 9% increase in activity. So the last area of demographic breakdown is ethnicity. There's been a huge increase in activity levels for Chinese residents, so it's up from 52.6% to 70.2%, where we can see for Greater Manchester the South Asian levels of activity are 52.2%. Trafford and Manchester actually have higher activity levels among that population than Greater Manchester. So when we look at inactivity levels, there's been a decrease in inactivity levels for black residents, so it's down from 37% to 35.3%, and white British residents, where it's down from 26.2% to 25.3%. Manchester has the lowest levels of inactive people among the South Asian population, as we would expect with their activity levels having already been shown. So when we break this down to types of activity, we can see that there's been an increase in walking for leisure and walking for travel, and kind of taking part in adventure sports, and there's been a decrease in cycling for leisure and sport, in swimming, in team sports and in racket sports. When we break this down by gender, for males we've seen a significant decrease in sporting activities but a significant increase in walking for leisure and travel. And when we look at females, we've seen a significant decrease in cycling for leisure and sport, but a significant increase in walking for leisure. When we look at how many people have taken part in sport and physical activity at least twice in the last 28 days, there's been no significant change at Greater Manchester level over the last 12 months, which is consistent with the national trend. There's still a gap to the national levels of 77.5, but we're up slightly from the 74.3% that we got in November to 74.8% as shown with the blue line. There's been no significant increase in any borough, but Bolton, Manchester, Salford and Wigan are showing increases since November 16-17, It's also kind of showing that across Manchester the levels have kind of come a bit more into line, whereas Stockport was quite far ahead at one point. So look out for the future releases. So on the 6th of December 2018 we've got the CYP Active Lives that will be released. And in summary of today's presentation, positive direction and huge gains in tackling the stubborn inactive. Fairly active and active are moving in the right direction, but inequalities still persist across the demographic cohorts. If you have any questions or would like to send any feedback on this webinar, please contact Hazel Musgrove. Her email address can be seen on the screen, or you can visit our website for the borough packs and further information.